Hi everyone, welcome to Mark's 900. I'm Mark, and as you can tell from the video title, I'm off to ride a Kawasaki Z H2. That's an H2, not a H2. Anyway, I know that in the past I've remarked that I'm not going to ride a Z900 forever. Well, that's true, but trust me, this video isn't about me looking for a new bike, and I've never considered a Z H2. The fact is that a new Kawasaki shop has opened up in Gloucester Meteor Park. That's just between Cheltenham and Gloucester, and right next door to the Yamaha dealer, because I guess they're all part of the Completely group. So here we are back in the business park, and as you can see, we've got J&S motorcycle accessories, Completely bikes with hundreds of used bikes in stock, Yamaha, and now right next door we've got the Kawasaki shop. The question is, where is the coffee shop? I mean, come on guys, people will flock to a place like this, but not if you can't get a brew and a bacon butty. Anywho, I came here yesterday as I'm on a few days off, and I had a wander around the shop. I thought there were going to be loads of salespeople all over me, but actually there was no one around at all. But I did notice that they had some demo bikes outside. They had a Z900 RS, a ZX10R, which I sat on, and I've got to say, I found very uncomfortable. I think I'm just too old for that, so I didn't want to take that one out. And there was, of course, the ZH2, so I've come back to see if I can take that one out. So let's get in the shop and have a quick look round. Here we are then inside this stunning showroom. I say stunning, it is a little bit green. I know it's Kawasaki, but you can have enough green, right? Anyway, no one about again, which is odd and sort of eerie, but I'll just take a look round while I'm here on my own. And I can see there's loads of Z650 RSs, there's a whole load of ZX10s as well, and just moving my way around the ZX10s, I can see a couple of sold bikes. Now both of them are brand new Ninja 1000 SXs, one in green and one in black and red, and I love the black and red one, which in my opinion is much nicer than the green, but that is, you know, just personal taste. I'd definitely consider one of those as a contender to replace my Z900, but I haven't even had a chance to sit on one yet, let alone take it for a ride, so that's maybe for another day. And the one thing that does put me off about those Ninja 1000 SXs is that there's an awful lot of them around, which is kind of proved by this sold section, so I can't say that I'm really surprised to see that. Moving on, and just opposite we've got a Kawasaki Z H2, resplendent in black and red, but we're going to go outside, see if I can find somebody who'll let me go and test ride that green H2 that's out there. Okay, so there was still nobody around, and I ended up going to Yamaha next door, and they told me that the Kawasaki place isn't open yet, something about health and safety in the steps, and in fact I shouldn't have been in there. Oopsie, well never mind. Anyway, they signed out the keys to me, they said I could have the bike, and so we're ready to get going. So I've got my helmet on, let's go wander over, let's have a look at this bike and then go out for a spin. I've got to say, just standing back and looking at it before I get on it, even though it's a demonstrator bike, which shouldn't really make any difference, but I just stand there, look at this, and it is a fabulous looking bike. So the ZH2, first impressions as I get on? Well, it feels very familiar and just like the old Z900. The display is the same, except that the splash screen is slightly different on startup and it has the ZH2 logo. The height, the sort of seat position is the same. Pegs, gears, handlebars, all exactly where I'm used to finding them. Starting it's a bit of a challenge because it's got this slidey thing instead of a press button, so I'm kind of hitting buttons that I don't really need to hit. But then it starts and it sounds epic, really meaty, and I know this sounds like a bit of a cliche, but when I give it a slight rev, it sounds like an animal snarling. Like, really, I'm not just making that up. I don't know who tuned this exhaust note, but I'd like to shake their hand. The other thing you notice straight away is that with a decent amount of revs it invokes the supercharger, and as you come off the revs it makes a very distinctive chirping sound. Now I know people across the land love this sound, but for me it sounds less like a chirp and more like something rusty sort of swinging around that needs a drop of oil on it. The growl, however, from just revving the engine, I cannot get enough of. Just don't like the chirp. Right then, out of the business park, and as we ride off, I've got to admit that I had some preconceptions about this bike. I thought it was just going to be too much of a grunty muscle bike, only to be ridden by somebody with a chest wig and a big gold necklace, and useless for everything except bragging about in the pub. Now I was particularly concerned about the handling at low speeds around town and on the daily commute, that sort of thing, so let's begin with a gentle ride out past the airport, and we're on some slow roads and have some traffic lights, stuff like that, so the typical sort of commute type ride. So whilst we're riding along on these slow roads, I just want to think about taking a test ride for a moment. If you're like me, you've probably done your homework and you're 90% on the way to deciding which bike you would like to get next, despite the fact that you haven't actually ridden one yet. It's just too much hassle to choose by riding all the bikes first, and let's face it, by the time you're riding the 10th bike you've forgotten exactly what the first one was like. I would point out that just having a sit on a bike in a showroom is quite often enough to make you decide whether you would like to proceed with maybe buying that bike, or whether you're just going to completely write it off as one that you perhaps don't want. Now, I know that I went and sat on a Z400 and absolutely hated it. I've also found that I can't find a KTM that's comfortable to me yet. So you kind of whittle it down on paper and you have a sit on a few, and then you decide on the style and choose your favourite, and at that point you take it for a test ride. You're probably going to love it by then, which is a good job because you only get an hour. Now, when I went into the showroom today, I did try and ask for more, but apparently any more than an hour and I have to get permission from their director, along with taking out my own insurance. Now that's a complete faff, and unfortunately that's the case most of the time that I've found, certainly when I go into these showrooms. That's except for BMW, where I went in ages ago. They let me have an R1250R and said just bring it back when you finish and we close at 5 o'clock. And I've got to tell you, that was a good day out. So what I'm saying is that you get an hour to decide if you like the bike, just like I've got now. It's not a lot of time unless you really know your stuff. This isn't the time to decide whether the suspension isn't quite up to it or the brakes aren't sharp enough or whatever. All you really get a chance to do is to get to grips with how it rides and whether it's got the right level of grunt for you. Then there's the whole, do I feel good riding this bike? Do I look good on it? And is this really the right bike for me? So it's really just that sort of superficial stuff. Well, I have to say, by the way, that the BMW I took out really didn't cut it for me, despite all the time that I had on it. I can't really put my finger on what the problem was, I just didn't feel right. But what about this Z H2? Well, here's a spoiler alert. I'm not actually featured in this video because I was enjoying myself too much. I simply couldn't bear to waste any of the valuable 60 minutes setting up a camera and trying to talk into it, and that should give you some idea of exactly what I'm thinking about with this bike. I mentioned that I wanted to test the commute, and as you can see, I'm not aiming to break any speed limits on this bike. Possibly I still have hang-ups about taking that MT-09 out for a test ride and getting a speeding ticket 30 seconds after getting on it. Now, this bike I'm on at the moment certainly feels like a police magnet that's going to lose a licence faster than you can say 197 brake horsepower. Actually, on that point, 197 brake horsepower, 134 newton meters or 99 pound-feet of torque at 10,500 RPM. And with this being the top of the tree in the naked category, there's no expense spared on the bits and pieces. So just looking at the website, if you look at this bike and go and look at the technology section, it says that it has got an assistant slipper clutch, electronic cruise control, electronic throttle valves, Kawasaki launch control mode, Kawasaki cornering management function, power modes, smartphone connectivity, sound tuning, supercharged engine, that should be in capitals and bold, Kawasaki quick shifter, Kawasaki traction control, anti-lock brake system, IMU enhanced chassis orientated awareness, Kawasaki intelligent anti-lock brake system. So you can see, there's no expense spared. This is a top of the tree bike, and actually looking at the switch gear and just taking in the bike as I'm riding it along, you can tell that it is just dripping with quality. It really is a nice piece of kit. Now, I know you can get an SE version of this bike with upgraded forks and brakes, but honestly, are you going to be able to tell any difference? I don't think I could at the speeds I go, and let's face it, I'm going to set up the suspension and then never touch it again. The brakes will be just fine unless you go barreling into a corner at 150 miles an hour, and I hope you're not going to be doing that on the road, certainly not during a test ride. So I'm not really in a position to start critiquing Kawasaki's choice of brakes and suspension on their flagship naked bike after just 10 minutes of riding it. Rest assured that from what I can see, they are easily good enough. In fact, looking at the switchgear and the general feel of the bike is very much a premium quality item. And I really don't think there's much else that I can add about the level of the equipment that comes with this bike. It really is top drawer stuff. Let's get off and have a look around the bike. If I'm honest, I think it looks a little on the bloated side, and I have to say that it felt like there was a lot more bike to wrap my knees around compared with the Z900 when I was riding it. I guess with all that supercharger technology crammed into it, there has to be a compromise somewhere, and that is the weight and the looks. It has somehow lost the elegance of the rest of the Z range, but on the other hand, you could argue that it looks a lot more butch and worthy of its near 200 horsepower. Interesting point to note about the supercharger is that they painted the words in bright red, just so that no one misses it, and that's something I'm going to come back to at the end when I sum up. For now, as I look out over the Cotswolds with this bike in front of me, I would definitely look back at it on every occasion and be chuffed to bits that it was mine. So just before I leave this beauty spot at the top of the Cotswolds, I'm going to try and do some low speed manoeuvres. Now I know I've said the bike's a little bit heavier, it's certainly very difficult to manoeuvre around when you're off the bike, but what's it like doing these sort of slow turning circles? And I've got to say it's remarkably easy. In fact I can't believe how easy that is. It's got a very tight turning circle and the bike's beautifully balanced, so you can just go round in these very tight circles going at low speed, and you could pass your riding test on this no problem at all. It's just dead simple. I've been on the bike 20 minutes, no problem at all doing the slow speed manoeuvres. Okay, let's get back out onto the open road. We've kind of done all the slow stuff now, haven't we? So let's see if we can get out there and give it a little bit of welly. So let's start off with some country roads, and it absolutely eats these up. I mean, it really is at home on these long, windy, fairly quick sort of open roads, having a great time. Now, the bike itself doesn't feel like it really wants to get away from me, which was something I was a bit worried about. But actually, if you could see the dash now, you'd see that as soon as I get to 4,000 revs, it starts flashing at me, because the bike's absolutely brand new, and what they didn't want me to do was just go revving it through. It's got to be broken in. So they've got that thing that happens when you buy a new Kawasaki, that the revs flash at very low revs and make you change up much earlier than you would do normally, which then of course affects the performance, because if you give it too much throttle it's quite forgiving. I mean, there's loads of torque, but even so, if you're in a gear that's too high and you give it a lot of throttle, it's still not going to do too much. So actually it's turning out to be a little bit of a pussycat riding it around if you stick with that sort of changing up the gears early. I'm guessing that if I was to go anywhere near 10,000 RPM, it's going to rip my arms out of their sockets, but that's a whole different game. For the moment, it's just behaving itself really nicely. So what I'm going to do here is come around this roundabout and join the A417, which is a very fast dual carriageway, and you do have to get up to quite a decent speed before you can join this main road. So what I'm going to do is, as I say, just follow this round, head down the slip road, and then give it some throttle and see what happens. So we come down there, just easing in, and then give it some, and whoa, that goes so fast that it actually cut my camera out. So we're going to try that again in the other direction. Trust me, I didn't turn the camera off last time, it turned itself off. I was going way too quick to take my hands off the handlebars. So going down here, I'm just going to wait and see what that van does, and yeah, he swapped lanes. So let's give it some now, and oh my god, the speed this thing goes, it gets you to triple figures faster than you can believe. I mean, genuinely, the speed this bike has got is utterly incredible. Honestly, I have never ridden anything like it, and I've ridden some fairly quick bikes, but this is ridiculous, and I've had to slow it down now and go back to the go back to the speed limit. Wow is all you can say about that, really. So let's get back whilst I still have a driving licence, and I'll sum up my thoughts from riding this bike around for just 1 hour, which, as you will remember, is about the time you're likely to get if you test ride one, certainly in the UK, or at least if you go to the same showrooms as me. I've had about as much fun as it's possible to have with the trousers on, but would I buy this bike? Well, frankly no. I hand it back with the feeling that I haven't really done it justice, and I wanted to do so much more, but that's never going to be possible if you ride it on the road. It's simply too much bike. If you're on the track every weekend, then maybe, but I'm not, and if I was, then I'd probably take a racing bike with fairing and clip-ons so that I wasn't getting battered by the wind. This bike would wear me out in minutes if I rode it on the track. It's a street bike, but with too much power for the street. Sure enough, right, if I won a competition and I had to choose between a Z900 and an H2, then of course it would be the H2 all day long, but I simply wouldn't go as far as to say that I'd spend my own hard-earned cash on the H2, because the extra cost only allows you to have a load of capability that you're simply never going to use. If I was more like one of those guys who has to succeed in everything in life and have the best and never settle for less, you know, the ones that are always telling you how big their house is or how they've been on a better holiday, or if you've done something, they've done it better, you know exactly who I mean. I reckon that person would have to buy this bike. Sure, they could get a Ducati Street Fighter, a Super Duke, an MT10, or even one of the racers, but at the end of the day, if you have the H2, you get to say that it's not just a litre bike, but it's a supercharged litre bike. And just in case no one believes you, it's written on the side in bright red. Ideal for the select few, and a great bike to showcase Kawasaki's innovative engineering. For us normals though, who have to think about budgets and wheeling their bikes out of tight garageways every morning, I think we should stick with a Z900. Just the right amount of power, better looking, arguably, and nowhere near as heavy to move around. That said, if you get the opportunity to go and ride one of these, it's an awesome piece of machinery and will leave you with a smile on your face for days. Right everyone, thanks for watching this far, and remember, whether it's an H2 or a Z125, just make sure you keep your chains oiled. I'll see you soon. Oh wow, you're still here. Right, I have an afterthought just for you, and something that needs to be said. Can you imagine sleeping with a porn star? It's going to be the night of your life, but you will probably come back thinking that you were never really enough, and you definitely don't want to marry them. Did you enjoy yourself? Yes. Would you do it again? Yes. Is this the one for you? No. And that's an H2. Right, enough of this nonsense. Definitely the end. See you soon.